Hello, everyone. I'm Lou Zaccarella. Welcome to part two of our Moment of Truth interview with Amirzai Sangin, the former Minister of Communications and Information Technology for the Republic of Afghanistan. As we continue our conversation today, we explore the work that Mr. Sangin did in that country shortly after the American arrival in 2002 until he left the country. A lot of this material is included in his new book, and today we talk more about his experience there. This episode was supported by our Institutes for the Study of the Intelligent Community in Hsinchu, Taiwan, and in Dublin, Ohio. The ICF podcast is also supported by the members of the Intelligent Community Forum. Thank you. We'd like to welcome today Elefsina in Greece, the newest member of the ICF community. We now take you to part two of my interview with Mr. Amirzai Sangin. Now, before I want you to talk about the social and economic impacts of your work, because for the intelligent community, that's really the key thing, right? But before that, the next year, I think it was 2006, you established an ICT institute to train people. So in addition to building a new way of thinking about telecommunications, building a new railroad for Afghanistan, you also said, I'm going to produce talent so that we can create more people who understand this and understand what we're trying to accomplish. Tell us a little bit about the thinking there, because the ICT Institute, I think I don't even know if it exists now. I don't know if they are allowing it, but you're training 50 people a year.
Yes. Well, you see, when you want to bring in this advanced technology to a country which had nothing, it requires human resources, capable human resources. It's very important. And initially in 2002, we only had a few people who had studied in Pakistan or in Iran, and who returned to Afghanistan. Otherwise, it was a huge lack of young people which had knowledge of ICT. So that is why initially when we engaged the private sector and they invested in Afghanistan, in fact, lots of qualified engineers were brought from abroad. These companies employed people from Pakistan, from India, from Bangladesh, from Nepal, from Europe. So I think each company had probably about 50 to 100 foreign nationals working in Afghanistan. And of course, it was, foreigners working in Afghanistan becomes quite expensive for the companies also, because they require high salaries. And then their bottom line, the profit, of course, get affected with that. Sure. But what we did was, we knew that this cannot continue for too long. And we knew that it is required that we train and educate young Afghans. And that's why we established the ICT Institute, which graduated bachelor level engineers in telecommunication and ICT. And we established already that in 2006. In the first batch graduated in 2010. And since then, every year, about 40 to 50 young engineers are getting graduated from that institute. And in fact, to get this together with, of course, some universities also started training young people in ICT. So by 2013, 2014, many of these foreigners who were working in the telecom in ICT sector in Afghanistan, they left. And their place was taken by young Afghan new graduates, and they were actually doing the job. And we had many Afghans who did very well. Actually, they established IT companies. We had about 10, 15 IT companies, software development, hardware producers, So Afghanistan was making good progress, you can say, very, very good progress. We were very proud that these people could present what they were doing in Afghanistan.
Yeah, and it's classic intelligent community formation. The ecosystem was beginning to take shape. The entrepreneurs were staying. You were now growing your own seed, your own talent, yes. Homegrown talent, which is the best kind, right? Because, well, for obvious reasons, and the ones you cited. Does the ICT Institute still exist as the
yes,
new
yes,
government?
It's still
it does still exist.
Still exists. It is still
very good. Now, I want to talk about the social and economic impacts of your work. I know that's something that's something you're very proud of as well. The increase in revenues that were coming in during your time, the social impacts. I mentioned the election and other things. How when you write about this now in your new book, Me and Telecommunications, what do you say about the social and economic impacts of your work? And what guidance would you have for others in other places who are starting to go down the path of developing their networks?
Yeah, well, you can say during the whole period, our focus was the people. And in my 12 years engagement in the Ministry of Communication in ICT in Afghanistan, I was less interested in paperwork. You know what happens in many governments? I saw many ministers, they're only interested in paperwork, all the signing documents, signing
or stamping them. They like to stamp them.
Yeah. And my method was different. I told my team, I want practical work. For me, the work, and I defined the work. I said, a work is something which, when done, brings a benefit to people, to maybe some people, maybe to many people, but that's what I call the work. So I said, whenever my team was saying, I have written a letter, I told them, no, that is not the work. Tell me when the job is done. Tell me when the people get the service, whether it is a phone service or whether it is an internet service. Mm-hmm. So I had my objectives of actually targeting the progress of mobile services, of internet services, reaching to the people. This is how it was done. I was only following the final result of a work being done and people being benefited. So we were, you could say, on the impact it was making was, the people, it brought a great convenience in the life of the people, because now these people from their phone, sitting in their home, they could talk with anybody in Afghanistan or anybody abroad. And as you mentioned, because we had this competition of 5 companies, it brought tremendous competition, and the prices were so low that almost everybody could afford a mobile phone and use a mobile phone. Right. And in fact, when I was in US in one of my visit, I was asked a question that in Afghanistan, the mobile phone is only for the men. The women are not benefiting from this phone so much. And I was a little bit shocked by that question, because I thought, how come? I had the feeling that the services were used by all, by men, by women, and by children, by young people. So in fact, I realized that the reason for this conception might be this perception might be is that in Afghanistan, when you buy a phone, a SIM card, you registered it in, maybe often it is registered in the name of the man, in the name of the male. So there are not many phones registered in the name of the female. So maybe that is why there was this perception that the mobile phone is being used by male. So when I came to Afghanistan, in fact, I asked the USAID to carry an independent study about this, about the use of the phone. A study was made, and this study showed already, I think it was in 2000, maybe 9 or 10, I don't remember the exact date. This study showed that already at that time, 80% of the Afghan women had access to mobile phones, and they were using mobile phones in their life. And 40% had their own phones. Another 40% of the women had access to a common phone in the house.
So they had their own device.
Yeah. A device. They had access to a common device at home. So you can imagine 80% of the Afghan women already in 2010 were using mobile phones. And of course, as I mentioned, by 2014, there was nobody in Afghanistan without a phone. I can tell you, even beggars, you know, the beggars in the street of Kabul, even they were having a phone. Even they were using
right.
even they had a phone. Yeah.
They were getting the football scores. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you it made it ubiquitous.
You could see that the social life of the people, it was improving the quality of life. And one other thing I want to give an example, a good example, how it improved the quality of life for the people. In Afghanistan, you know, we have the skilled workers, like the electrician, the masoner, the carpenter, the painter, the plumber. You know, these are the skilled workers. So what happened prior to mobile phones, there were specific points in Kabul, in the cities, in the city center, where these people would come in the morning and sit on the roadside.
Right.
And then anybody who needed one of these skilled workers, they would also come there and just point their finger at one of them and say, can you come and work for me today? That's how it was. And some of them would get a job for that day. Some of them would be sitting till lunch and then finally give up because nobody came to give them a job. But can you imagine how the mobile phone affected them? Because once the mobile phone came, they had their phone, and then they don't need to sit on the roadside anymore. Already a day before, somebody would be calling them and say, tomorrow, are you free? I need you for tomorrow to do a painting or a summer job. So in fact, when I asked some of these people, how's your life now? How do you feel? They told me that it has made a huge difference in their life. They don't have to be humiliated sitting on the roadside in cold or in the heat of the sun or in the rain. Now, already they are booked few days in advance. They are booked. Somebody has called them and they are booked and they have job. It is more convenient. And also they say our income is now 2, 3, 4 times higher compared to what we were earning before.
Because so they're able to do other things with their time.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Plus spend social capital. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so this is, you know, the skilled workers. When you come to people studying, as you mentioned, students, they got access to knowledge. People in the school, they got access to knowledge. People in the university, they got access to knowledge. And it was a huge change in the life of the people, because people were no longer kept in the dark through their mobile phone and through the internet service on their mobile. They were able to see the whole world, and they had access to the knowledge of the whole world. And so I think the social impact, whether it was men or women or young people studying or even children, it was enormous. It was enormous. It was enormous. Let me give you one more example about the social impact from my hometown, Urgun, for example. Many of the people from Urgun area, they go to the United Arab Emirates for work. So the men, they are working in the UAE, and their wives and children are back in Afghanistan. So prior to mobile phones, these men, they had no contact with their families. They didn't know how the wife is doing, what the children are doing, how they are doing, whether they are having any problems. So probably they were writing letter to each other once in a while. Or I remember they used to record a cassette, and send a recorded cassette to each other.
Right.
But now with the mobile phone, these people in Dubai and Saudi Arabia, these workers, they were able to set up a WhatsApp call and talk to their family and see them in the phone in a video form, you know. And
Yes.
it's quite, if you can think about it, it's a dramatic change. And in fact, Afghanistan being a very least developed country, I would say that the only major thing that has happened in their life as a result of the recent change in Afghanistan, the last 20 years in Afghanistan, the real change which the people can feel in their life, I think this is the telecommunication and ICT. And because it is still there and they are still using it, and the people got used to it and they are benefiting from it. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for those stories. I mean, that's exactly, I think, what people need to hear. I have to ask you, I don't think we've ever talked about this, but your understanding of human needs and your willingness to help people through your work, even though, you know, obviously our industry is a highly technical one in telecommunications and satellites and so forth, but your willingness and your understanding, as I say, of the human heart, the human community, I have to ask you, does that come from where you were born? Is there something in Oregon or your family that gave you this, was it a religious thing, a sense that gave you this compassion?
I think you can say that I have been the lucky person to experience all different situations, very varied situations in my life.
Good and
varied
bad
situations, you know. You know, being born in a rural area, and then having lived in a very economically very less developed place, and then also not having had the I forgot the word, not having had the pleasure or the being lucky, not having been lucky to have had a comfortable life when I was young.
Right. Having a difficult, not materialistic.
Yes, exactly. Materialistic. You know, I had a very difficult life. You see, in fact, I can tell you that in those days when I was a child in Afghanistan, and even when I went to Gardes where I studied, economically, my family, we were we didn't have money. There was no money in the family. We probably just had. My father was just about able to manage the family to eat something, but apart from that, there was no money. Yeah, I can just tell you one story about my first night in Kabul, which is in the book actually. So I came by a truck or maybe by a lorry from Gardes to Kabul, and we arrived in the evening, and then the truck stopped. It was a few mud rooms around that place, and this person told us we can stay in that one of these rooms. And when I went into the mud room, there was nothing on the floor. There was no mattress. There was no pillow, nothing. And so, in fact,
no room service either, right? Amirzai, no room service.
Can you imagine? I spent my first night in Kabul in one such room, and it was spring time. It was a cold night. So in my life, I have been through such different phases in different situations. And in fact, that's why as you said, coming back to Afghanistan, it was like, my, I had the tremendous desire to do something to help people to improve their life, because I have myself lived in difficult situation. And even now, whenever I see people of Afghanistan suffering from any economic aspects or from many aspects, I still get the feeling of urgency that I must do something. Whatever I can do, I must do something.
You have a sense of tremendous gratitude, which is a lesson that many of us need to pay attention to. You have humble beginnings, and in 2006, you arrive in New York City, and you're receiving an award, the ICF Visionary of the Year Award. You give a speech. It electrifies the crowd. People are leaning on their seats, listening to your story, an amazing story. 6 years later, you come back to present that award to Senator Stephen Conroy from Australia, yes, who's also the telecommunications minister of that country, who had done something quite bold by forming the national broadband network in a difficult environment. And so you hand him the Visionary of the Year Award. There's a picture of that up. I have to ask you, after describing what you just described about your childhood, your duty going back to Afghanistan, all the things you've done, how did it feel to stand there and get the award, and then 6 years later give it to a colleague who was also taking on a great national challenge?
Yeah, thank you, Lou. For me, it was a great honor to receive that award in 2006 from you, from the ICF. And in fact, I didn't know I was a visionary. You somehow, based on maybe on what I had done, called me a Visionary of the Year, and it gave me a great feeling of happiness, and it was an honor for me to receive such a distinguished award from you. And already at the very early stage of my work in Afghanistan, which was 2006. But I must say that after that, I had to live up to this award.
we put the pressure on you.
Yes, I had to live up to it.
We knew what we were doing. Yeah.
I had to work very hard. And we did it. We did it. And I think, as you mentioned, it was a tremendous success. We had, whether it was a mobile phone or whether it was the internet services, almost all the people got access to these services, and they were using it in their daily lives. And for us, this was a great achievement. So I was honored to be given the opportunity to present this award to Minister Conroy from Australia. And it was a very, I remember, I have good memory from that evening in the ICF event, a very happy event. And I have a very happy memory from that evening.
Yeah,
and I was very happy to meet, of course, I met many people there. Even there was a lady from Finland, I think, previous minister, I think.
Madam Suvi Linden, sure.
Yeah. She was also there, yes.
Yes, she was.
I have photos of her also in that dinner. Yeah. It was a great event, and I thank you for giving me the honor to participate in that event.
Well, you were tremendous, and as I said, I'm glad to know now that we were putting a little pressure on you to achieve at an even higher level. That would, like a good football coach. But let's go fast forward now. Afghanistan today. As I said, history does not move in a straight line. It doesn't always have the outcomes that we want in the near term, but we continue to live with hope that lives will get better. You and I share that same vision. Afghanistan today, I don't believe any new optical fiber has been laid. I'm not sure where the revenues are. When you were there, I think about 1.5 billion in revenues had been generated. If the telecommunications infrastructure is not going to be enhanced and move forward like it is in the rest of the world, if the revenues aren't going to be there and the economy suffers, and as you said earlier, if people continue to leave, is there a path forward for the country? Or do you have to hope somehow that your history repeats itself and that somehow another golden age someday emerges? How do you view it, the situation here today?
Yes, the way I see it is the time when I was there is, it was a golden period, because we had the investor which actually invested $2 billion. It was a huge amount of money, $2 billion in the economy. And from this investment, the people benefited because they got services. And our economy benefited because this investment contributed about $1 billion to the GDP annually, $1 billion it contributed. And in addition to that, as a result of this investment, there was 140,000, according to a study that was carried out, 140,000 job creation. So you can see that means 140,000 families got good life as a result of this. And even the government benefited greatly because the government got revenues. The revenues from the telecom in ICT sector were contributing about 12% of the total government revenue. 12%, the sector was in it. In terms of figures, during the 10 years from 2004 to 2014, the telecom sector contributed more than $1.5 billion to the government in revenues. So, can you imagine? It's a lot of money, $1.5 billion.
Sure is.
So, of course, now with the new situation, you can say currently the situation is not looking good. On one hand, one thing I can say is good. That is, with the war has ended. There is no war, and previously, because of the war and because of the insecurity, in fact, we had problem. On one hand, you can imagine about 200-300 people were dying every day, and there were many areas of insecurity where we could not go and bring in services to those areas because of war. But now the good thing is the war is ended. But of course, that is only one part of the story. The problem, we have huge problem as far as the economy of the country is concerned. Currently, there in Afghanistan, there is no money. The banks are having problem. With the US having frozen the Afghanistan reserves, about $10 billion being frozen by the US. So it puts a huge economic pressure on Afghanistan. The banking service is not working. They are not able to give the people the amount of money. I think it is limited to about $200 a week or something. A person can withdraw from a bank. So there is a shortage of money currently in the country. And the people are suffering. I think when there is no money, it means the telecom sector will suffer, because then people are not able to spend money on their phones, on their internet. So it affects the telecom companies. So what we should hope for is that what I'm hearing is from many countries around the world is that they will not allow the economy of the Afghanistan to collapse. So that is one good point, that I hear that many government of the world, although on one hand they want to put pressure on the Taliban government to agree to a broad-based government, to agree to let women go for education and let women go to work. And I think these are some of the issues the world is having with the Taliban currently, and maybe on human rights. But what I've heard from the Taliban, at least they are not the same as what they were 20 years ago. If you think 20 years ago, TV was forbidden in Afghanistan. During the previous Taliban government, TV was forbidden.
And during your tenure, digital TV, when you were there, digital TV was introduced. So that's now.
Yes, now we have. So and now even the Taliban are on the TV. They are giving interviews, they are talking on TV. So this is a change. In the previous Taliban government, internet was forbidden. Can you imagine? But now Taliban are using the internet services. Everybody is talking on WhatsApp. They are having access to global internet services. So this is another change. And I think from what I've heard from the Taliban, they are not like what they were before, not to allow girls to school and not to allow girls, women to work. But of course, they are saying that they want to have this within the framework of the Sharia, which means that maybe the women should, I think currently from what I heard was that the women and the men and women, when they are going to universities, should not sit together. I think they want separate classes for the women for the girls from the men. So there may be some certain changes in the education system from the implementation point of view, but I think the Taliban are open. They are open for girls' education, and they are also open for women going to work. I think this is important. Well, when I now have experience from around the world, I think now I'm in Turkey, and here I see the women are contributing to the development of this country as much as the men are doing. And that is the same in Malaysia, which is another Islamic country. It's the same in Indonesia, which is another Islamic country. It is, I have lived in the United Arab Emirates. There, the women are playing a very important role in the development of the country. They are as much as present in the work as much as men are present. So when you look at all this, I think Afghanistan cannot be different from all these countries. We are also in Islamic countries, and I think Islam is not preventing women from education or from work. So I really hope that the new Taliban, which are now in power, having changed from the previous 20 years ago, will give the woman the right for education, and will also give the woman the right of work. So I really hope that very soon the pressure that the world is putting on Taliban give result, and somehow maybe there is a certain change in the actions of the Taliban, and also maybe I think the world also need to engage with our country, because can you imagine if there is economic collapse? Can you imagine if the bank system collapses? And as a result of this, the whole of our work will also collapse, because the ICT companies, they will collapse. Correct. And what will happen? Afghanistan will go back not 20 years, it will go back hundreds of years, and exactly so this will be a catastrophe. This will be a catastrophe. I really hope that the world will work with the Taliban government and not to allow this to happen. And and once I think there is this problem, this current problem, of course it is too early. It's only now, it's not even 2 months since the change has happened. I am hopeful that in the next few months, there will be some light on this situation. We will not be in this situation what we are today. I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic that
you always are.
That this current issue will be resolved, and I'm optimistic that if the world don't let this catastrophe happen, then I think very soon we can the Afghan people, they are ready to start again. You know, the education, the change that has happened in Afghanistan, as I said, of course, brain drain has happened. But the system is still there. The education system is still there. And many educated young people are still there. Qualified people are still there. So I think the conditions for development still exist. And if you overcome this current situation of uncertainty of the relationship between the Taliban and the rest of the world, once this is overcome and once the situation normalizes, I hope it normalizes, because it will be in the benefit of the whole world, not because I'm thinking about the Afghan people. They, so if we normalize the situation, development comes to Afghanistan, the Afghan people will benefit. On the other hand, if we have this catastrophe of the system collapsing, the economy collapsing, the banking system collapsing, and the Afghan currency collapsing, then of course, even the ICT sector will collapse. And then what happens? Then of course, I think extremism will come up, terrorism will increase, insecurity will come, and it will affect not just in a negative way, not just Afghanistan, it will affect, of course, the whole world. So my hope is that we avoid this scenario of collapse, economic collapse for Afghanistan. And my hope is that we solve this problem, and relationship between the world and the new government of Taliban in Afghanistan normalizes, and then we start on the path of progress again.
I think that's very well said, Amirzai. I don't think anyone could have said it any better. It's almost it's a poetic wish for the country. We've seen what happens when nations and communities collapse. I mean, that's one of the things that the ICF tries to prevent everywhere, for communities collapsing, because we know what the consequences are. So I think you've said it right. Again, that's what a vision is of a healthy community. You've laid the foundation. You spent 10 years doing remarkable work. The foundation is there if the nation and the world want to pay attention and build on it. And I think we know that technically we can do anything. We're very advanced. You have proved that. Socially, it's where we humans always seem to be a little bit behind, and it's where we need to do our work. And I think that's really where the hard work comes next. I couldn't agree with you more. We're at the end here, unfortunately, but your book, is a story of one man's life, but it is also the story of a country in the modern era.
Yes.
And we hope that people read it. It's currently in Pashtun, but we know you're looking for an English language publisher. So what I'm asking people to do, if you approve, is if they have an interest in the book, they can contact us, and then we'll put them in touch with your publisher, and we'll hopefully have an English language version soon. But I think, Mr. Sangin, I'll call you Your Excellency, as I once did when you were in office. You have written a history for a nation. You've articulated something that is at the heart of the Intelligent Community Forum's ideas, that any place in the world with the right thinking can develop, and develop quickly. And so, I want to thank you again. I know, we've been friends for a long time, but every time I hear your story, hear you tell it, or hear other people tell it, I realize what a hero you are. And so I honor your love of your country, but I also honor your love to make a better world. So with that, I'm going to thank you again for coming. And of course, we'll be in touch.
Thank you. Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Lou. It was my honor and pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you so much.
Well, that concludes our interview with Mr. Amirzai Sangin. It was one of the most compelling podcasts that we've ever done on this show. And we want to thank Mr. Sangin for choosing us to be among the first to tell his story. If you're interested in learning more about him and learning when his book will be available in English, contact Matthew Owen at mowen@intelligentcommunity.org. We'll notify you when it becomes available. In the meantime, you can continue to read about Mr. Sangin and the Intelligent Community Forum on the ICF website, intelligentcommunity.org. And while you're on the website, remember, we're less than 2 weeks away from the January 22nd deadline to submit nominations for the Intelligent Community Awards program. There's no cost to your community to submit a nomination, and communities that do submit will not only be entered into consideration to be named a Smart 21 community for 2022, but this year will also receive a snapshot report comparing their community, your community, to our international data set of cities and communities, again, at no cost to you. More information can be found at intelligentcommunity.org/nominations. Please follow us on Twitter at New Communities and on Facebook at Intelligent Community Forum. We hope also that you and your friends will subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. For our producer, Matt Owen, and for everyone at the Intelligent Community Forum, I'm Lou Zaccarella, reminding you that there really is no place like home. Take care, everybody.